May 1565. The greatest empire on earth unleashed 40,000 of its finest warriors, 80 siege cannons, and 2 monstrous basilisk guns firing 160-pound stone balls. Their target? A speck of rock in the Mediterranean, defended by just 500 knights. 2 weeks, they boasted. But 4 months later, the ground ran red with blood, boiling oil, and liquefied human fat. Their own dead became sandbags. And the knights? They were firing human heads from their cannons. This wasn't a siege. It was a descent into an abyss of unhinged, unimaginable savagery. A place where every rule of war died screaming. You won't believe how 500 knights and 6,000 Maltese civilians dragged the unstoppable Ottoman Empire into a hell so brutal, survivors refused to speak of it. Learn how human heads became ammunition, how sewers became weapons, and why Turkish engineers feared how they'd die more than death itself. This is the Siege of Malta. And medieval warfare was about to reach its absolute terrifying peak. Picture this: 1565. The Mediterranean was a Turkish lake. Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, a name that echoed terror across Europe, had forged an empire that swallowed Hungary, clawed at Vienna's gates, and dominated North Africa. His navy, 200 ships strong, ruled the waves. But one tiny, infuriating thorn pricked his mighty heel. Malta, a desolate rock, home to an anachronism, the Knights Hospitaller or Knights of St. John. These weren't just crusader relics. They were holy pirates, relentless raiders who terrorized Muslim shipping for centuries. Their grandmaster, Jean de Valette, 71 years old, a French nobleman whose very name was a curse whispered by Ottoman mothers. He'd survived a year as a galley slave, learned Arabic and Turkish, and personally sent so many Ottoman sailors to their graves. He was a living legend of terror. Now, facing Suleiman's wrath, Valette commanded a mere 500 knights and perhaps 6,000 Maltese militia. Engineers swore their 3 forts couldn't last a week. Against them came Mustafa Pasha, a seasoned conqueror, and Admiral Piali Pasha. Their force, 40,000 men, including 6,000 janissaries, the Sultan's elite fanatical killing machines, honed from childhood into perfect instruments of death. And with them, Dragut, the Mediterranean's greatest corsair, a ghost of the sea who knew every secret weakness of Malta's defenses from decades of raiding. This was not a fair fight. This was an execution. May 18th, 1565. The Ottoman juggernaut landed, confident, unstoppable. Malta, a barren rock devoid of water or food, seemed a trivial prize. The knights had 3 forts, St. Elmo guarding the harbor, and the main defenses of Birgu and Senglea. St. Elmo was a flimsy outpost, expected to fall in 3 days. Instead, it became a month-long crucible of hell, setting the tone for the entire siege. The Turks unleashed 80 siege cannons, including the monstrous Basilisk and Destroyer of Christians, bronze beasts that rained down 7,160-pound stone balls daily. The fort's walls began to crumble into dust, but at night, the knights didn't rest. Under the cloak of darkness, they crept out, gathered the enemy's own cannonballs, heated them white-hot in roaring furnaces, and fired them back, turning Ottoman tents and powder stores into instant, exploding infernos. When the walls began to gape with monstrous breaches, the knights did something truly demented. They killed Turkish prisoners, drained their blood, and mixed it with clay and limestone to forge a grotesque, rapidly hardening concrete. When prisoners ran out, they used their own dead, stuffing bodies into breaches, covering them with earth and rock. The Turks were literally assaulting fortifications built from human corpses. Imagine the horror, the stench, the utter depravity. But the true savagery, a secret weapon, Greek fire, Not just the ancient napalm, but a version horrifically enhanced with human fat rendered from dead Turks. This hellish concoction clung to skin, burning with an unquenchable fury that water only spread, turning men into screaming, fire-spreading torches as they ran back to their lines. June 3rd, the Janissaries, the Sultan's elite, launched their first major assault at dawn, expecting weakened, demoralized defenders. What they found was not defense, but an art form of cruelty. Fire hoops, wooden wheels soaked in oil and pitch, set ablaze and rolled down into packed Ottoman ranks. Primitive trumpets of fire spewed jets of burning oil 30 feet. Clay pots of quicklime exploded, blinding anyone caught in the suffocating cloud. Yet the knights themselves were the deadliest weapon. Fanatics, they believed death in battle against Muslims guaranteed paradise. When Turks breached the walls, knights would lock them in desperate, armored bear hugs, then leap from the fortifications, their combined weight dragging both to a bone-shattering death on the rocks below. Their savagery shocked even the hardened Janissaries. As St. Elmo's walls became an unrecognizable ruin, the knights escalated their horrors. Hollow cannonballs filled with wild, screeching cats were lobbed into Turkish trenches. Imagine digging for your life in the suffocating dirt, then a cannonball explodes next to you, unleashing a furious, clawing, insane nightmare. Cannons became giant shotguns, loaded with chains, nails, and broken glass, tearing men apart. But when metal ran short, they found a new, sickening ammunition. Human heads. Not skulls, but fresh, dripping heads. A Turkish soldier fell. Immediately decapitate him. Load his head into a cannon. Fire it back. The psychological impact was devastating. Ottoman troops watched in horror as the faces of men they'd just shared breakfast with flew towards them, sometimes fitted with crude fuses, exploding into grotesque bloody mist among their comrades. Then, a twist of fate. Dregut, the legendary pirate, arrived to take command, a tactical genius the Ottomans desperately needed. As he surveyed the devastation, a cannonball ricocheted, sending stone splinters tearing through his skull. The Mediterranean's greatest corsair bled out over 4 agonizing days, his brains seeping onto the scorched earth. The Turks desperately hid his death to prevent a morale collapse, but the desperate, panicked movements in their ranks betrayed the truth. The knights knew. When St. Elmo finally fell on June 23rd, it was a Pyrrhic victory of unimaginable cost. The Turks had paid a horrifying price. 8,000 men, including half their elite Janissaries, were dead. They found 500 Christian bodies, but only 9 knights alive, all too broken, too utterly mangled to survive the day. Mustafa Pasha stared at the carnage, a chilling, terrifying realization dawning. If this tiny, 3-day fort cost so much blood, what fresh hell awaited at the main defenses of Birgu and Senglea? Mustafa Pasha made his gravest mistake. To break the knight's spirit, he ordered the beheading of St. Elmo's defenders, their hearts torn out, their bodies crucified on crosses and floated across the harbor. He expected terror. Valette delivered something far worse. Every single Turkish prisoner in Birgu, hundreds of them, was immediately decapitated. Valette had their heads loaded into cannons, fired back at Ottoman lines. But one head was reserved for special treatment, the Turkish commander's own lieutenant. It was launched from the largest cannon directly into the Ottoman command tent during a staff meeting. It landed on their planning table, its dead eyes staring accusingly at men who'd known him. The siege of Birgu and Senglea became a horrifying contest in creative brutality. The Turks launched a massive siege tower from the sea. The knights waited until it teemed with troops, then unleashed chain shot, shearing its supports, sending hundreds plunging to a watery grave. Turkish swimmers attempted to place explosives. The knights poured oil on the water and set the sea itself on fire. Malta's sewers became weapons, human waste, rotting animals, diseased corpses, all channeled into cauldrons, heated to boiling. This toxic, bubbling soup was then dumped on climbing Ottoman troops. Men struck by it didn't just die. They contracted infections that ripped through the camps. Dysentery and typhoid claimed as many Turkish lives as the sword. July. A massive mine ripped open Birgu's walls, bringing down an entire section. Thousands of Turks surged through the breach. Then, a living ghost, 71-year-old Valet himself, grabbed a pike and led the counter-charge. The sight ignited a berserker fury among his men. Knights fought with multiple arrows, skewering them, holding their own intestines in with one hand while swinging swords with the other. The breaches became tunnels of corpses, the dead piled so high that combat happened atop mountains of flesh. There was the infamous Post of Death, where knights chained themselves to the walls, choosing certain, brutal demise over retreat. Turks had to literally dismember chained bodies to advance. The relentless summer heat turned everything into an open-air abattoir. Bodies piled unburied, bloating under the sun. Clouds of flies swarmed so thick they blurred vision. The stench was so overwhelming that men vomited inside their helmets while fighting. Both sides were fighting in air literally toxic with decomposing flesh. Water supplies, contaminated with blood and corpses, meant wine was the only drink, a desperate measure against certain death from disease. By August, all pretense of civilized warfare vanished. Knights catapulted plague-infected corpses into Turkish camps, a medieval form of biological terror. Turks retaliated with severed heads, sometimes etched with grim, mocking messages carved into the skulls. Soldiers weren't just killed. They were creatively mutilated as psychological warfare. Bodies arranged in obscene positions, faces skinned and stretched on shields, genitals cut off and stuffed into mouths. New weapons of suffering emerged from the twisted minds of the defenders, hollow pikes that injected boiling oil directly into wounds, ensuring prolonged agony. Barbed arrows designed to tear out intestines upon removal. Clay pots filled with scorpions and venomous snakes, sealed until combat, then shattered among enemy ranks. Imagine fighting for your life, then suddenly dozens of venomous creatures are crawling up your legs. Maltese civilians, pushed to the brink, matched the knights' savagery. Women feigned surrender, luring Turks into deadly ambushes where children, armed with knives, would hamstring them, allowing the women to beat them to death with rocks. Old men, too frail to fight, threw themselves on Turkish swords to impede advances with their own bodies. Priests blessed weapons dipped in excrement to guarantee infected, agonizing wounds. Katerina, a Maltese woman, became legend. When Turks finally planted their banner on a section of wall, she hurled her own infant child at the Turkish standard-bearer, the baby's body knocking him off the wall. Then, she grabbed the banner herself and leapt off the wall with it, choosing death over the enemy flag flying over Malta. The knights made her a folk hero, naming a bastion after her. The psychological torment escalated. Turks tortured captured knights just within sight of the walls, slowly dismembering them over hours. Valet responded by doing the same to Turkish officers, using medical knowledge to keep them alive and conscious longer. Both sides competed to make death as prolonged and excruciating as possible. Water, the essence of life, became a weapon of death. Malta had no natural springs, only cisterns. The knights poisoned wells in areas Turks might capture with decomposing bodies and human waste. Turks who drank it died of dysentery, so violent they literally defecated themselves to death. The Turks retaliated by catapulting dead animals into Christian water supplies. Biological warfare unleashed on an unprecedented scale. The knights, knowing every Ottoman assault pattern, prepared specific horrors for each. For scaling ladders, they waited until the ladder was full, then poured boiling oil mixed with quicklime down it. The lime blinded climbers while the oil burned them, causing mass falls. For siege towers, they prepared fire pots, ceramic jars filled with Greek fire that would shatter on impact, covering entire structures in unquenchable, terrifying flames. August 7th, the greatest, most desperate assault yet. Turks attacked simultaneously by land and sea, a final all-or-nothing push. 9 hours of unadulterated hell. Turkish standards were planted on Birgu's walls. Victory seemed assured. Then Valet played his final, terrifying card. He unleashed the galley slaves. 500 desperate criminals, promised freedom, surged into the fray with the fury of men with nothing left to lose. The massacre was absolute. Turks, over the walls, were shoved back onto their own climbing comrades. Men plummeted into the moats, literal pools of blood, oil, and liquefied human remains. To fall in was to drown in gore. Ottoman officers reported men refusing to advance, not from fear, but because the carpet of bodies was too unstable to walk on. But here's the detail that shatters comprehension. Amidst the worst fighting, exhaustion was so profound that combat would spontaneously stop. Knights and Turks, utterly spent, would sit among the corpses, sharing water before rising to resume the slaughter. They fought in shifts, not by strategy, but because the human body simply could not sustain such unending violence. Ottoman supplies dwindled. Dysentery and typhoid claimed hundreds daily. Turkish soldiers began refusing orders, not from fear of dying, but from terror of how the knights would kill them. Morale shattered as rumors spread. The knights were cannibals, eating Turkish hearts for strength. False, yes. But after 4 months of unimaginable savagery, the troops believed them capable of anything. September 8th, Spanish reinforcements finally arrived. A mere 600 men, but the Turks, broken and exhausted, believed them to be thousands. Mustafa Pasha, utterly defeated, ordered the retreat. The Ottoman Empire's grandest military expedition had been broken, not by an army, but by 500 knights and a tiny, blood-soaked island. They left behind 30,000 dead. The knights had lost 250 of their 500 brothers and most Maltese defenders, but they had held. The aftermath was apocalyptic. Malta was a lunar landscape of craters, shattered ruins, and countless corpses. Cleanup took months. Bodies were so numerous, their pyres burned so hot, their smoke could be seen from Sicily, a grim beacon of a nightmare. The island's soil, poisoned by blood and human remains, refused to yield crops for years. To this day, archaeologists unearth cannonballs fused with human bone in its ancient walls. Suleiman the Magnificent, consumed by rage, immediately planned an even larger invasion for the next year. But death claimed him first. The Ottomans never returned. 500 knights had shattered the empire's relentless westward expansion. Malta became a terrifying symbol. If this tiny rock could withstand 40,000, perhaps the invincible empire was not so invincible after all. The knights rebuilt Valletta, a new capital named after their Grand Master, designed as an impregnable fortress. Every street, every building, a kill zone. They prepared for the next siege, fortifying relentlessly. It never came. The Ottomans had learned a bitter truth. Some victories cost more than any defeat. Malta's veterans were broken men, living ghosts. Turkish survivors refused to speak of the horrors they had witnessed, their minds scarred beyond repair. Knights were regarded with awe, bordering on fear. They'd endured 4 months of combat so intense, so utterly soul-destroying, that normal warfare felt like child's play afterward. Many never fought again, not from physical wounds, but from a profound combat exhaustion, a moral injury that no one had seen before. The siege fundamentally changed warfare. Biological weapons, psychological torture, deliberate savagery, these became the chilling Malta model, studied in military academies. What happens when all restraint, all humanity, is abandoned? The stark conclusion. Such mutual destruction was so catastrophic, it must never be repeated. Yet Malta's true legacy was psychological. An unstoppable empire, halted by 500 men, a testament to determination, to savagery over strength, to a small force willing to do anything to win. It was a lesson that echoed through history, from the American Revolution to Vietnam to Afghanistan. Sometimes, the side willing to be more brutal wins, regardless of numbers. The Knights of Malta, champions of chivalry, had turned their island into an abattoir, using human bodies as building blocks, heads as ammunition, and the basic human need for water as poison. They violated every principle they supposedly stood for, and they won. The Ottoman Empire's greatest defeat came not from a massive army, but from 500 men who decided they'd rather turn their island into hell on earth than surrender. Today, Malta's fortifications still stand, silent witnesses. Cannonballs remain embedded, some still cradling fragments of human bone. The island is a stark, grim monument to what happens when warfare abandons all limits. The Siege of Malta wasn't just a military victory. It was proof that humanity is capable of violence so extreme, so calculatedly savage, that contemplating it 450 years later feels like staring into an abyss. It defended Christianity through methods that would have horrified Christ himself. The medical aftermath uncovered unimaginable horror. Physicians examining survivors found knights who'd fought for weeks with untreated, broken bones that had fused incorrectly, creating grotesque, permanent deformities. Men carried sword fragments embedded in their bodies that their flesh had grown around, turning them into living repositories of shrapnel. The knights' habit of fighting while severely wounded led to infections that created new, terrifying diseases. One knight was found to have been fighting with gangrene so advanced his leg was literally rotting off. He tied it to his body with rope and continued fighting for 3 more days. Turkish doctors reported similar cases, including janissaries who'd gone blind from quicklime but continued fighting by sound alone, swinging at anything that spoke Maltese. The sheer level of pain these men endured and ignored broke all medical understanding of human limits. The economic cost was staggering, far beyond mere numbers. The Ottoman Empire had spent the equivalent of 3 years of imperial revenue on the siege. They'd lost their best engineers, their elite janissaries, and, most importantly, their reputation for invincibility. Christian slaves across the Mediterranean began revolting, believing if Malta could resist, so could they. The loss of 200 experienced naval captains crippled Ottoman naval power for a generation. Venice and Spain, emboldened by Ottoman weakness, became more aggressive in their Mediterranean policies. The failed siege triggered an economic cascade. Ottoman war bonds defaulted, causing financial crisis in Constantinople. The resources squandered at Malta could have conquered most of Italy. Instead, 40,000 men and millions in gold purchased nothing but 30,000 graves on a rocky island. Perhaps the most disturbing legacy was the normalization of extreme violence among the survivors. Knights who returned to Europe brought Malta's methods with them. The use of human remains as psychological weapons spread to other conflicts. The 30 Years' War saw commanders who'd studied Malta's siege employing similar tactics: heads as ammunition, bodies as building materials, biological warfare through contaminated water. Military manuals began including sections on Malta model tactics, methods once considered too extreme for normal warfare, but now acceptable in desperate defense. The Knights had proven that any atrocity could be justified by calling it survival. European warfare became notably more brutal after 1565, as if Malta had given explicit permission for savagery that had previously been unthinkable. The siege didn't just save Malta, it infected European warfare with a new, terrifying level of acceptable brutality. But here's the ultimate, soul-crushing irony that haunted both sides. The extreme violence had been unnecessary. Later, Ottoman documents revealed Suleiman had already decided to recall the fleet if Malta hadn't fallen by September, fearing the approaching winter storms. The Knights' final, desperate defenses, the last savage month of fighting, the thousands of deaths in August alone, all of it happened when the Ottomans were already planning to leave. Similarly, Spanish reinforcements had been ready for months, but delayed by bureaucracy, not distance. If they'd arrived in July, thousands of lives would have been saved. Both sides had essentially tortured each other for an extra month for no strategic reason, just the unstoppable momentum of violence that neither could halt. The siege had developed its own monstrous logic, where stopping seemed more impossible than continuing the slaughter. Malta proved that wars can become so savage they continue past any rational purpose, fed only by the previous atrocities demanding revenge. The most horrific month of one of history's most brutal sieges had been completely pointless. A mutual massacre that achieved nothing except proving humans could sustain inhuman violence far past any strategic necessity.